Quick thing on the budget. Now, budgeting is an art as well as a science, and you're going to be hearing a little bit more about pricing in one of the workshops, not next week, but the week after, in one of these webinars. Do not underestimate how long a budget takes to prepare. It can take a very long time. In the previous webinar, I talked about having a budget sketch done, very simple outline of what the tasks are. Some donors, I mean, I remember one funding bid, I spent 2 weeks working on the budget. I mean, it was an insane level of detail that they were looking for. The RISA budget for this project, I started doing it in November 2023. I finished the budget in May 2024. The level of detail that RISA wanted is absolutely bonkers. But I did it because I wanted to do it for you. So there we go. Don't underestimate how long a budget takes. Prepare in advance, use your budget sketch, know your costs and your rates, so you don't really have to, you know, put a finger in the air and make it up and then know if it's right. Try and work those out. We talked about that last week. Sometimes budget evidence is required. So for the RISA budget, for this project, I needed to provide evidence of how much it was going to cost to send Enrico, who's our trainer on 3D printing. We didn't know who it was going to be, to send him to, say, South Africa, as he was a couple of weeks ago with TMG Makerspace in Johannesburg and the Makerspace in Durban. So they needed evidence, even though I didn't know where they were flying from, or even which cities in South Africa he'd be flying to. Their evidence required for the budget was 3 quotes for flights. They needed quotes for hotels. They had a table for how much was allowed to be charged or claimed for food and for hotels. They wanted quotes. In the end, I negotiated with them that I wasn't going to do this. At one point, they wanted quotes for the taxis from the airport to the makerspace or to the hotel. And I said this was ridiculous. I pushed back on that, and they let me off. But yeah, they often want the lowest level of detail in the budget, and they often need 3 quotes. So getting the evidence together, if you have to submit evidence with the budget, that can take a long time. And it's one of the reasons why the RISA budget took me months to do, because I was, you know, having to essentially pretend like I knew where people were flying to and from. So I went from, with the RISA budget, between November and May earlier this year, the budget went from 6 lines, because we had 6 activities that required travel, to 135 lines, because the donor required evidence for the budget. So I couldn't just put a total. It went from 6 lines to 135 lines. Do not underestimate how long it takes to get the budget evidence together. It can take a very long time. Hopefully you will only ever be asked to do that after you've been shortlisted. How to handle day rates. Do you have a low day rate for a short period of time, or a high day rate for a long period of time? No, sorry, that's wrong, isn't it? Maybe Becca can change this. A low day rate for a long period of time, or a high day rate for a short period of time. The amount's going to end up being the same, basically. So you might, say, charge $500 a day for 10 days to get $5,000, or you might charge $50 a day for 100 days. Thanks, Becca. We're going to talk about this more in the pricing workshop, but you've got to have an approach to this. And a lot of it is about how you manage your finances internally if you win the grant. But yeah, so think about this a little bit. And you've got, I mean, essentially part of the judgment is what looks right based on what you've written in the budget. Indirect costs. When you're budgeting, do not skimp on indirect costs. Ask for the absolute maximum that you can get. Bear in mind that the maximum indirect cost rate for some organizations, like a big university in the UK, their indirect cost rate can be 130%. But for us little NGO charity types, it can be as low as 7%. Get the maximum you can. Do not cut it back to save money. Do not do that. Get the maximum you can that you're allowed to get. And another hint, put lots and lots and lots into direct costs. So if usually you think your bank fees or your finance software or your public liability insurance or your trustees insurance or your electricity bill is in indirect costs, take it out and put it as a direct cost of the project. Have electricity bill, have insurance, have bank fees as a direct cost in the project if you can. Because indirect costs are essentially, in most cases, your budget for fundraising. The thing is, remember that you can't take the total available funds and apply a percentage. So let's say it's a $100,000 funding opportunity with 10% indirect costs. 10% indirect costs on a $100,000 maximum grant is not $10,000. It's 10% of direct costs. So you would probably need to spend something like $93,000. And then you would have something like, no, that math doesn't work. $93,000, 9,300. So $91,000, 9,100, something like that. It's a percentage on the direct cost, not a percentage on the total. So it's, yeah, you can't just take 10% of the overall total. Be careful of that because the accountants will come back and tell you off, as they have done with me many times. Okay. Another thought on the budget. Do you link to the objectives and activities? I said at the beginning of this webinar with the RISA project, we had the donor objective, we had the activities 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then in the budget, we had activity 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. I linked it so there is a specific budget line for every activity in the budget for this project. But you've also seen in this webinar budgeting by category, or just maybe you just need money for staff and that's not linked and the staff do all the activities. So you have to take a view as to whether you want to link it to the activities or not.